Welcome. You all made it, I see. I assume you're not in a hurry to start. The most important part of this retreat is the energy field of presence that arises both collectively and in each individual. Presence, we can use other words, awareness, consciousness, unconditioned consciousness, etc. Is already arising in you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come here. Except perhaps for a few people who came out of a sense of obligation because they couldn't say no to a friend who invited them, whom may already be wondering what this is all about. So the essence of the retreat is inseparable from the essence of who you are, and the essence of who you are is inseparable from the essence of the totality of the universe. You all encountered, or many of you encountered challenges on your way here. That tends to happen in life. And I'm told that some of you experienced, as you were lining up to register, some of you experienced a condition of frazzle. If that is the case, it may be time to let go of it right now. And your main practice, if we want to call it that, during this retreat, which then hopefully is not going to leave you for the rest of your life, so it's no longer a practice, it becomes your natural state, is to have the main focus of your attention in the present moment, And there's still more than enough left consciousness of past and future that you need for certain practical purposes. Always these things are necessary. But you're no longer absorbed by past and future, not lost in it. To be lost in past and future is a normal human condition. And the normal human condition, as I often say, is a condition of partial insanity, and occasionally and sometimes total insanity. And that is because we are evolving. There is an evolutionary growth of consciousness. And the universe we inhabit is an awakening universe. Gradually, in time, the timeless dimension of consciousness reveals itself more fully, gradually, in you and in the universe. And that's already a paradox. For example, we are going to spend time here. This evening, the next few days. But although from a conventional viewpoint that is the case, in your immediate experience, it's always the present moment. It's this. So time, past and future, is inseparable from the workings of the human mind. So when we say you lose yourself in time, what it really means is you lose yourself in the mind, the thinking mind. Which is a great thing when you're not completely identified with it and therefore are no longer lost in it, but a terrible thing if your whole attention, your entire identity is absorbed by it. That's the condition of unconsciousness, spiritually speaking. So I'll tell you a little at the very beginning. I'll tell you about the little secret about how this all works. There is a dimension in consciousness, in human consciousness, that in most humans is dormant most of the time. It's a potential. It's there in everyone. And that could be described quite simply as the ability to be conscious without the interference of thinking. That's the simple secret. To be able to let go of thinking, especially or most particularly when you don't need it at all. The useless mental noise, the continuous labeling and interpretations, and experience the liberation of being simply aware, fully conscious, much more awake than in the state of being identified with thinking, which compared to the state of presence could be described as a type of sleep. That's why we call it unconsciousness or dreamlike state. And if you can catch it here, while you listen, for example, here, right here and now, do you need to think to understand what it is I'm talking about? No, because right now I haven't said anything significant from the point of view of the human, of the conceptual mind, the human ego. So, but can you understand what it is that I'm talking about right now by quite simply experience that to which these words point, which is the state of absolute clarity, peace, deep peace, but not the peace that you experience when you're half asleep, a peace that is also alert at the same time. Just clarity. And in that clear awareness, sense perceptions still happen. And there is a knowing there that is very different from the knowledge of the conceptual mind. There is a deep non-conceptual knowing in which, for example, you can encounter another human being and you look at them, you listen to them, you can sense their energy field, and you know them in the deeper sense without conceptualization, without knowing anything about them. It is a deeper knowing that is non-conceptual. You don't have access to it if your entire consciousness is continuously absorbed by the conceptual mind, the activity of thinking. Of course, thinking is needed, but there needs to be a balance between of the non-conceptual knowing, the deeper knowing, and the being able to use the conceptual mind when it's necessary. But no longer looking to it for your identity, for your sense of self. That means not looking for your sense of self, not finding your sense of self, not being deluded that your sense of self can be found in the narrative of your life, the story, which consists of mental accumulations with emotions that accompany the mental accumulations. That knowing was described, for example, in very ancient Christian and pre-Christian teachings as the Greek word gnosis, which is spelled Gnosis. Gnosis, knowing. Sometimes it's translated as knowledge, but it's knowing. It points to the possibility of a deeper dimension of consciousness. You could call it higher too. They're just words. And then you become rooted in that field of awareness, and you're no longer looking to the story of your life to supply your sense of self. That's an enormous shift. And what that means is the entire thing that you call my life is a story accompanied by emotions. And the stories and those thoughts that are most frequently repeated and identified with accompanying emotions, this bundle of thoughts and emotions that in the unconscious state you're completely identified with, it makes up the person, a conditioned entity. And it cannot go beyond its conditioning unless there's an awakening. And at some point in humans, the awakening happens, and usually when the story of my life becomes very unpleasant, then there's the chance that a crack appears in the ego, because identification with the story is the ego. It becomes the me. So right now, although some of you may be a little tired or jet lagged, all these things, or the frazzle hasn't left you yet, I often like to act it out because it becomes very clear what this is. What's he talking about? So let's already, in this first session, go to the very heart of what this is all about, the retreat. And maybe if you get it totally right now, you don't need to come back. So there's nothing to work out mentally right now. There's nothing that you need to understand. There's nothing that you can understand about this, not conceptually, but you can know it by, even if it's just glimpses of simply being aware here without mental noise. What's left of you? Well, it's hard to say what is left of you when you're not thinking about you. What's left of you when you're not thinking about your problems, when you're not thinking about the next meal, when you're not thinking about what happened 2 hours ago, you're not thinking about the rest of your life, or your past life, or your ex-wife or husband, or whatever you're thinking about, and not thinking about anything at all. So in other words, there is a stillness. Thinking has been replaced. It's another word we could use. It's just another pointer. Thinking has been replaced by stillness, alert stillness. And then the question might arise, who or what am I without the person that is continuously upheld by thinking, the person, the me? What's left? And you can't say much about it, except you know that there is a presence. But you don't know it in the same way that you know an object. I can look at the flower and I know, even if I don't conceptualize it, there is a deep knowing when I look at this flower that through which I can sense the being of the flower. There's a much deeper knowing than knowing what the name of the flower is or how it grows or concepts. There is a place for that in this world, yes, but not to be lost in it, to have access to a deeper knowing. So even a simple thing like a flower, when I do not conceptualize it, and I'm still for a moment while the perception happens in the space of awareness, the flower is intensely alive. And there's a deep joy in recognizing that which is beyond the sense perception, because the aliveness of the flower is beyond the sense perceptions. And that is where the real beauty actually originates. The beauty originates in that which you cannot see or detect with your senses. And then you get and then something shines through the form and you call it beautiful, but the origin of anything beautiful comes from a deeper place that is not accessible to sense perception, and certainly not accessible to conceptualization of sense perceptions. And this is your practice, especially during this retreat, to perceive as much as you can, visually, auditory, also tactile, whatever it may be, to perceive without letting go of the need to interpret the perceptions. So that, because it's the person that interprets according to the person's conditioning. I like this, I don't like that, this shouldn't be, or this should be, but it isn't. It's all kinds of things. Letting go of that, and what remains is the isness of whatever may arise in the space of now. So, and you don't, the compulsion to interpret, label, categorize, come to rapid conclusions about situations and people, letting go of all that so that something deeper can arise, higher, deeper, whatever you want to call it. So that's the essence of it all. So I'll be continuously pointing to that. I will also be pointing to the likely obstacles you may encounter to this realization. And so the shift that happens is your sense of self or your sense of identity increasingly is no longer derived from your past, your history, your personal history. That would be normal. That's the normal. That's your identity. That's the me. What happened, what I did, what was done to me, what I did, what I experienced, what I suffered, my defeats, my victories, it's a mixed bag of things for many people. For some, it's predominantly very bad. Things have gone wrong, maybe many wrong decisions, or things were wrong from the moment you were born into very unpleasant conditions. It does happen. And then you have a memory of that and all the things that happened as a result of very early suffering. And that can keep you occupied in this fictitious identity for the rest of your life. So many people carry a very painful identity around with them, a painful sense of self. They may blame somebody, themselves, parents, society, God. And there may be some others who have a very kind of identity that says, I'm really so good. I'm the best at most things. And probably you're still relatively young. It can happen to young people who haven't experienced very much. If you're older and you still have that, then you're really deeply unconscious. But if all things are going well in your life, because you have been so clever that everything is all your investments are great, your job is great, and your family life is great, and your children are successful, and your health is fantastic, and everything is great. It's virtually impossible, but it's a fictitious case. If that were the case for somebody, it could not last very long. And probably nobody is in that position here, because otherwise, why would you come here? I'm totally fine. So if you are a successful banker at Wall Street and with everything, so you're not likely to be here, but something has gone wrong, and maybe you're a successful banker with a very high investment income and so on, and yet something has gone wrong somewhere. Then perhaps you've come here. Or if you're lucky, you lost all your investments. Then there's a greater chance, if you've lost something, of being open to the awakening of consciousness, because the unawakened consciousness becomes too painful. And that's basically the reason why people awaken eventually. The unawakened consciousness becomes too painful for everybody. And that's where the whole purpose of human suffering is. It has a purpose. It's here to awaken you. Now, of course, some of you may suddenly think, I can hear one or two thoughts. What if it kills you prematurely, which you can also do? Or it can be so dreadful that even awakening is not possible because it's physically so dreadful. Then the essence of who or what you are, of course, is not affected by the physical conditions of this vehicle, temporary vehicle. It will continue to seek awakening elsewhere. So suffering has a purpose, and the purpose is awakening. That's Buddha talked about it. Dukkha, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. That's what he said. meaning I show you how suffering arises and I show you how suffering can end. I teach suffering and the end of suffering. The central image of Christianity is a man suffering extreme agony on the cross. It's the central image of Christianity, is one of suffering. And again, as the Buddha said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. The agonizing, the agony of Jesus on the cross points to the possibility of transcendence through death and resurrection. So the cross is, as I've mentioned a few times before, the cross is both a torture instrument and a symbol for the divine, for the transcendence of suffering. It's a paradoxical thing that is contained in that image. You don't need to be a Christian to understand that. In fact, if you're not a Christian, perhaps you can understand it better. And so Jesus is the archetypal human, every human. And it points to the possibility of every human. That's why Jesus said, all the things that I do and greater things you will also do. Oh. And he said, I am the light of the world. And he said, you are the light of the world. Oh. What is the light of the world? Consciousness.